If you're like most British Columbians, you've probably had a look at what's going on in our provincial politics, and I had one of two reactions. One, I just don't even care anymore. I don't even care. Or two, what the f*** is going on? But I promise, we'll make sense of this. Last time on BC Politics. An election for a premier and provincial government was held on May 9th. It resulted in the Liberals losing their 4 straight term absolute majority by a single seat, with the NDP 2 seats behind at 41, and the Greens pulling in an historic 3 seats. Which means that whoever they vote with will win. They ended up making an agreement with the NDP, wherein they agreed that they would help them form government, but also agreed that they could still vote in favour of the Liberals on lots of issues. But before the NDP can take control, the Liberals got a chance to form government. After all, they won a plurality. Lots of people thought Christy should step down, which is understandable, but also wouldn't make much sense for her because, again, she won a plurality. And so, business went on as usual, with a Liberal government. Oh, did I say normal? I meant completely the opposite. The Liberals delivered their speech from the throne, basically a statement of all their plans, and it was different. They almost completely turned on their own platform in a bid to align much more closely with the NDP platform in order to gain their support. Kept bridge tolls at $500 annually? Not anymore, let's just get rid of them. Create a committee to review campaign financing? Nah, let's do your thing. Let's also increase social assistant rates by $100 per month too. Good idea, guys. And we changed our mind. Let's raise carbon taxes. Reduce MSP fees? Let's just get rid of them. This results in a couple of things. First, what about the 50% of voters who actually voted for the Liberal policies? I mean, we all understand that if who you voted for doesn't win, then what you voted for doesn't happen. But if the Liberals decide to do the NDP plan, what happens to all the Liberal voters? The party just can't be trusted anymore. The second effect is that this spreads to the other parties as well. Can the NDPs and Greens really say that they stand for what they stand for if they'll vote it down just because it doesn't come from themselves? Well, they think so. They readily voted down a Liberal bill that would reform campaign financing, which they both heavily supported before. Even more shocking, they voted down a bill that would give the Green Party official party status, one of the few must-haves for the Greens when they were debating which party to support. More important than that to the Greens, I think, is their signed agreement with the NDP. They refused to vote in favour of a government whose confidence hasn't been tested. And so now, they wait to test the confidence of the House, when the Liberal speech from the throne will be voted on. As I'm writing this, the vote hasn't happened yet, but it happens very soon, and most likely, it's gonna fail. So let's talk about what happens after the Liberals lose the confidence of the House. So scenario 1, the Lieutenant Governor could call another election, or 2, allow the NDP, with support from the Greens, to form government. But it is questionable whether or not they are actually in a position to form a stable government, and if that's even what people want. At first glance, this seems simple. 44 is a majority, 43 is not. But once the NDP appoints a speaker, they're locked in a stalemate at 43-43. And before a bill even gets to the final yes or no votes, which would end in these 43-43 ties, the bill gets examined in detail and is debated and revised. This process is referred to as the Committee of the Whole. During this process, the speaker leaves, and a deputy speaker takes their role over the debate. This would result in an NDP Green minority at 43-42. Certainly not a stable government. But there is a workaround for this. For issues that are contentious, and seeing as almost every vote would end in a tie, they certainly would be contentious, the debate is often shifted to a smaller committee, referred to as the Little House. Here, the NDP would form a majority, and so they could still allow for debates and some reforms, but still be able to push through their bills to the end. This would result in a much more stable NDP government. It's not a perfect solution, though. The final vote would still happen in the Legislative Assembly, with a 43-43 tie. So really, this will allow the NDP government to avoid being bogged down by their slim majority, but will still result in a tie and questions about the speaker. So here are some possible solutions. Number 1, the Liberal Party's newly appointed speaker, Steve Thomson, could remain in his position under an NDP government, resulting in a 42-44 balance. Traditionally, a new speaker is only appointed after an election or when they resign, since in this scenario, there wouldn't be another election. He would remain speaker until he chooses to resign, so this is entirely possible, though it may result in him becoming somewhat of an outcast within his own party, and so he might be unlikely to do it. Number 2. Thomson could resign, and a Greener NDP speaker, who are allowed to vote in the event of a tie, could break the tie, although there are quite a few traditions attached to how the speaker votes. They're supposed to be impartial, so it may be frowned upon if they always side with their party. They're also expected, though not required, to uphold the status quo in the event of a tie. So if a majority can't make a decision, then the speaker would vote the bill down. At the same time, though, in bills of confidence, if the speaker voted against the NDP, then the government would lose the confidence of the House, and another election would have to be called. So in general, tradition says to support the NDP in bills of confidence, while supporting the opposition in the likely event of ties on most other issues. That's the tradition anyway. But most importantly, these are guidelines, and first and foremost, the speaker is entitled to vote on their own intuition. And it doesn't entirely make sense to vote based on tradition when a one-seat majority is uncharted waters that tradition has never had to deal with. Instead, the most responsible vote for the Speaker, under these incredibly strange circumstances, may be to always support the government, to support the NDP. That would mean that the NDP government is, in fact, stable. So an NDP government led by John Horgan is definitely a possibility. We'll just have to wait to see if the Lieutenant Governor decides to call an election, or allow the NDP to have a shot at it, which she most likely will. If I had to bet money on it, then I'd say that there probably won't be one. At least not until after the municipal elections in fall of 2018. So most likely next election, at earliest, I think, if it's not called in July, would be spring of 2019. But again, we'll still have to wait and see. Thanks for watching.